Welcome to the Remembering Podcast. This is a podcast designed to help you remember who you are. I am one of your three hosts, OnenO.
I'm Taylor.
We got Taylor over here, yeah.
I'm KK.
And we got KK. We're coming to you live from Zoom today. We wanted to do a little bit of experimentation on Zoom. Taylor over here is what, you're like 7 months pregnant or so?
I'm doing like 58 days.
58 days.
I don't know where that puts me on the month. Well, because they measure it in weeks now. It's not even like months. It's like 40 weeks total. Yeah. So I'm tomorrow I'll be 32 weeks. And so, yes, I'm trying to be a little extra social distant, more cautious of that as we kind of gear up for that kind of vulnerable time. And so I really appreciate you guys hunkering down with me and doing this video instead of hanging out in person.
Yeah, we definitely miss being around each other, but we'll do that again soon. But yeah, so for the listeners out there, what did you say, KK?
Said, as the leaves bloom, we will see one another again.
Yes.
It's so poetic.
But yeah, for all you listeners out there, just bear with us if there's any kind of weird technical glitches or pops or things like that. We're going to try to make it as pro as possible, but this is our first experiment, so it's going to be fun. Today, we have a really fun subject that we're all three going to dive into from similar but slightly different angles. The subject is Christmas and the idea of the Advent and everything going on in this season. The three of us, in our exploration of the spiritual world, we have found several different analogies and metaphors and larger understandings about this time of year. So we thought we'd kind of pool our brains together and share all that info with you. So yeah, do you guys have anything you want to say before we dive in?
Well, I don't know. I feel like the way that I think about Christmas now is really different than how I grew up. In my family and the church I grew up in, it was very much Jesus is the reason for the season. Mm-hmm. Santa's a bonus, but we're not here for the presents. And I still think, you know, the meaning of Christmas in general of love and altruism and things like that is the reason for the season. And it's really beautiful. I've learned more about Jesus's actual birthday since then, which I'm sure we're going to get into later.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. Oh, what were you going to say, KK?
I just wonder if both of you feel the same way I did when I was a teenager. Like, if I ever like abbreviated Christmas to Xmas, I thought I was going straight to the depths of hell.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So
my mom hated that.
I used to run social media for this woman, and I was writing her tweets for her, and she was offering this, you know, sale on her website. And so I said, get your Xmas gifts, because you only get 140 characters. So I was abbreviating everything. And I got a scathing email from her about anyone who actually knew her would know that she never takes Christ out of Christmas. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get into her about how X is the Greek letter for Christ, but whatever.
It totally reminds me of that story when you are when you're in a when you're in a thinking pattern like that, where you're like, I have to use Christ in Christmas and I can't abbreviate it. It reminds me of that story of the Thanksgiving turkey, where the grandmother teaches the mother how to cook the turkey, and they shave both ends of it off. And then the mother ends up teaching her child, and then they shave the ends off. And then it goes like 4 generations back. And then finally a little girl's like, why do you guys shave the ends off? And the girl's like, or the mom's like, I don't know. It's how grandma did it. And that's how her grandmother did it. And that's how her grandmother did it. And it's like, I used to feel like this deep connection or this deep conviction when I saw people write X, or I did it myself. And out of rebellion, when I kind of left the Protestant church, I started just writing it. And because it's such a minute thing that so many...
You're so rebellious. You're such a heathen.
I know, but people get so mad about it, like so mad about it. And I'm like, calm down. It's just the next.
And the story about the turkey, they end up calling the great grandmother and they say, why do we cut the ends off the turkey? We've done it for years and years and years. And she goes, I don't know why you do it. My pan wasn't big enough to fit the whole turkey in.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. There's the punchline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe I just didn't have enough room on my Christmas card to write.
Maybe.
Maybe you
That's
wrote
probably it.
Mary in too big of letters and Christmas wouldn't fit anymore. So
Yeah.
you had to.
Well, now we live in the age
possibility.
of age of Twitter. There's not enough characters to spell it
There's
all
not
out.
enough character. That was literally my conundrum when I was
Uh-huh.
trying to do this tweet for this woman, and it did not go over well.
No.
I had no
Hey,
idea.
also one more thing before we officially dive into the subject.
Oh,
I
yes,
wanted
yes,
to
yes.
remind everybody out there that we have all of this social media out there, and we also have an email. Usually we say this at the end of the podcast, but I wanted to let you guys know early in this podcast. Our social handles on Instagram, we are the Remembering Podcast. On Twitter, we are Remembering 1111. And then our email is therememberingpodcast@gmail.com. And we've started getting a few messages and comments here and there. So send us more, hit us, like DM us on Instagram or send
Don't
us
be
an
shy.
email. Don't be shy.
We
Let us
wanna
know what you
interact
think
with
about
you.
this stuff. Yeah, because
Yeah,
the
send
more
us an
feedback we
email.
get from you, the more we have to talk about. So we'd love to talk directly with you. So reach out.
Absolutely. Well, I know, OnenO, you were inspired by some reading that you had been doing recently
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
about
So
the Christmas season. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, we've brought up Neville Goddard a few times on this podcast, and he's one of my favorite Christian philosophers. And
Can I
the way that,
interject?
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
All good.
Off to a great start.
We're really flowing, guys.
But I think it's important to note that that's how you and I connected
True.
was through Neville Goddard, because I knew OnenO pretty well through like mutual friends. We both were in meditation. And then one day he mentioned Neville Goddard and I was just like, hold up, you read his stuff? And then, or it could have been the other way. I can't remember. But then it was just like, whoa, that just takes it to a different level of understanding a perspective of being on earth and being human on earth is through like this man's teachings. If you're not familiar with who he is, I would say do some diving, because it changes the lens in which you see the world, and it installs that power that God, when we were created by the creator, we were installed with this power, and this author is able to articulate and like pump you up when you read.
Do you have a good starting point for someone who's a complete noob like me?
My personal favorite Neville Goddard book that just gets to the core of everything Kristen's saying is called Awakened Imagination. And that book,
I would agree.
It's so freaking, that's actually the first book I read.
The Imagination?
No, Awakened Imagination.
Awakened Imagination. Okay.
And it is a breakdown of the Bible story in a way that you've never heard, trust me. And it basically describes how it like gets to the fundamental myth, as Joseph Campbell would describe the myth of Christianity. What is it actually trying to teach us? And when we take these mythologies and we actually interpret them as historical fact, we miss the metaphor. So it's important to understand the symbolism going on so we can see how it actually is describing the inner landscape of every human being, AKA your imagination is actually the I am, the God presence within you, the canvas with which God paints the external reality. Imagination comes first, then physical reality reflects that. And this is what Neville is getting into. So to bring it up in the Christmas context, did you have a question, Taylor?
No, I'm just stoked about it. I've heard you guys talk about him forever, but I've never actually read any of his stuff. So I'm really excited.
Well, buckle up, because we're diving in. So, okay, this chapter, I'm going to read about 2/3 of this chapter. It's going to take about 7 or 8 minutes. And it's from his book called Your Faith is Your Fortune. So we'll be adding that to our book club list. Neville Goddard, Your Faith is Your Fortune. And this is chapter 11, which has the title Christmas. So yeah, there's a little bit of an introduction that I took out, or that I like maintained from this chapter, and then everything else just has to do with the Christmas story. So here's Neville and what I'm calling the introduction in this chapter. The Bible is a message of the soul and must be interpreted psychologically if man is to discover its true symbology. Man must see this story as a psychological drama rather than a statement of physical fact. The dates of the New Testament, namely the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus, were timed and dated to coincide with certain astronomical phenomena. The mystics who recorded this story noticed that at certain seasons of the year, beneficial changes on Earth coincided with astronomical changes above. And my interjection here is that what he's talking about is this is the moment in time where people literally figured out weather patterns by studying the sun, and then they turned it into mythology so that we could not only understand these weather patterns, but then use this story as a metaphor for the awakening of the God presence within each one of us, aka enlightenment, becoming a Buddha, and in the Christian world, becoming a Christ. So let's continue. Now Neville's going to break down the story of Christmas and how it relates to the sun, as well as how it relates to you becoming awakened. Here we go. The story of Christmas is one of the most beautiful stories ever told. The virgin birth is recorded as having taken place on December 25th, or as certain secret societies celebrate it, on Christmas Eve at midnight of December 24th. Mystics established this date to mark the birth of Jesus because it was in keeping with the great earthly benefits this astronomical change signifies. The astronomical observations which prompted the authors of this drama to use these dates were all made in the Northern Hemisphere. So from an astronomical point of view, the reverse would be true if seen in the southern latitudes. However, this story was recorded in the North and therefore was based on Northern observation. Man very early discovered that the sun played a most important part in his life, that without the sun, physical life as he knew it could not be. So these most important dates in the story of the life of Jesus are based upon the position of the sun as seen from the earth in the northern latitudes. After the sun reaches its highest point in the heavens in June, it gradually falls southward, taking with it the life of the plant world, so that by December, almost all of nature has been stilled. Should the sun continue to fall southward, all nature would be stilled unto death. However, on December 25th, the sun begins its great move northward, bringing with it the promise of salvation and life anew for the world. Each day as the sun rises higher in the heavens, man gains confidence in being saved from death by cold and starvation, for he knows that as it moves northward and crosses the equator, all nature will rise again, will be resurrected from its long winter sleep. And now my interjection here is he's going to switch gears a little bit and make this connection with the constellations. So continuing, he says, our day is measured from midnight to midnight. And since the visible day begins in the east and ends in the west, the ancients said the day was born of that constellation which occupied the eastern horizon at midnight. On Christmas Eve, or midnight of December 24th, the constellation Virgo is rising in the eastern horizon. So it is recorded that this son and savior of the world was born a virgin. It is also recorded that this virgin mother was traveling through the night, that she stopped at an inn and was given the only available room among the animals there in a manger. And there in a manger were the animals I'm sorry, I butchered that sentence. There in a manger were the animals. Oh, where the animals fed. Sometimes my quick brain leaves out little letters here and there.
Too quick, man, too quick.
I know, too quick. All right. So the Virgin is in the east with the animals. And now continuing Neville, he says, the animals with whom the Holy Virgin was lodged are the holy animals of the zodiac. There, in the constantly moving circle of astronomical animals, stands the Holy Mother Virgo. And there you will see her every midnight of December 24th, standing on the eastern horizon as the Son and Savior of the world starts his journey northward. And now Neville wraps it all up, bringing it together with his ideas of manifestation.
This is blowing my mind.
Yeah, this is amazing.
I'm just like sitting here with my mouth open, like, what?
I know. All right, so here's the last 3 paragraphs. Psychologically, this birth takes place in man on that day when he discovers his consciousness to be the Son and Savior of his world. When man knows the significance of this mystical statement, I am the light of the world, he will realize that his I am, or consciousness, is the sun of his life, and this sun radiates images upon the screen of space. These images are in the likeness of that which he, as man, is conscious of being. Thus, qualities and attributes which appear to move upon the screen of his world are really projections from this light within himself. The numberless unrealized hopes and ambitions of man are the seeds which are buried within the consciousness or virgin womb of man. There they remain like the seeds of earth, held in the frozen waste of winter, waiting for the sun to move northward or for man to return to the knowledge of who he is. In returning, he moves northward through recognition of his true self by claiming, I am the light of the world. Man will one day realize that this whole drama takes place in his consciousness, that his unconditioned consciousness, or I am, is the Virgin Mary desiring to express. He will then understand why Christmas is fixed on December 25th, why upon the virgin conception the whole of Christendom rests, that his consciousness is the virgin womb or bride of the Lord receiving impressions as self-impregnations, and then without assistance, he will embody these impressions as the expressions of his life. Thus concludes Neville Goddard.
Oh, wow.
Pretty freaking incredible, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So much to unpack.
Yeah.
To get the conversation starting, I wrote a small paragraph of my own here just to summarize my thoughts on what I read. We must raise our consciousness like the Son of God raises again, and I'm spelling that S-U-N, like the Son of God raises again beginning December 25th and brings new life to the planet. Our consciousness, or I am, as Neville describes it, is the manifesting principle of the universe. But while our consciousness is dead on the cross, which is a metaphor for the body, the spirit being within the body, that's the metaphor of the cross, it does not know it is the Son of God. Once our consciousness is resurrected to this truth, then we will light up the world and fill it with new life and manifest with abundance and prosperity. So this gives you a little bit of an understanding of how Neville is actually perceiving the Christ story and the metaphors and the mythology, the symbolism that is deep within this story. So I'm going to pass it to you guys. What are some of your first reactions?
I have something quick to interject. So that way you can go to town, Taylor, and then I'll circle back around. But when you were speaking, I feel like when people start hearing astrology, placements of stars and planets, people get turned off by that because they're like, oh, I don't follow astrology, or I don't know, I've transcended that. Or that's really an outdated school of thought, right? So I know that turns a lot of people off. And if that's you and you're listening, I've always been into the stars. I've always been into our connection with something outside of Earth. I think if you don't look up at night, then you've lost your connection to what you're actually made of. And I would encourage you to drive out to the country and just look up and remember that we are floating on a big rock in the middle of space. Like, this is big. Our reality is big. It's vast. It's grand. But I came across a quote the other day that blew my mind. And I've fact checked this. But JP Morgan, are you guys aware of him? That wealth tycoon. You might have his credit card in your wallet. He is quoted as saying that millionaires do not look to the stars, but billionaires do. And he was really deeply invested, as well as like Nancy Reagan. There's all types of political figures that are really into kind of the more esoteric ways of thinking that aren't just, handed to us in elementary school or middle school or high school or even college. They're ways of thinking that you kind of have to go and transcend logic, because in your logical mind, you can't entertain ideas such as, oh, maybe planet alignment actually does affect the way that things on Earth play out or transpire.
Yeah, totally.
Well, for so much of human history, everything was dictated based on the observations of the stars, because there wasn't a lot else to look towards other than agriculture patterns and stuff, but they could even tie those to the placement of the stars of those times. Yeah. So the placement of the stars throughout a lot of human history had to do with the time of year it was, what you would be doing that time of year, whether you're planting or harvesting. If you were traveling, it was your compass. Like, for a lot of generations of people, the stars were the most tangible way of tracking and keeping analytical charts and data. So It is interesting to say, yes, there's some metaphysical stories that have been associated with a lot of the star patterns, which I think are really fun to unpack and see if we can find truth in that as we apply it to our lives. But also, for a lot of human history, the stars were actually a really practical tool. So to dismiss them in general as being purely woo-woo would be doing everyone a disservice, especially like the early generations of humans.
Yeah. My reaction to both of you, as far as talking about astrology in this context, the way that what Neville is actually trying to talk about is not just that the Christ story is an analogy for these movements of the sun. The movements of the sun, which are told mythologically in the Christian myth, the movements of the sun are yet again another myth. So what is this? What is the purpose of this astrological myth? It's to describe the journey of man from his sleeping state to his waking state. That's the point of all of this. It's not actually about, is the Bible actually talking about the physical sun? Well, in a way, it's encoding this story. But again, it's the finger pointing at the moon, but you think the finger is the moon. No, we're trying to get to the moon. So to get to the moon in this example, the real seed of what Neville's trying to say is he's trying to talk about the journey of man himself from a sleeping state into a waking state. Meaning, when you, in the Christ mythology, in the Christ story here, then you have the consciousness being born in the physical body. That, I don't know if Neville says it exactly like this, but my understanding is the metaphor there is the physical body is the cross. Christ, who is being hung on the cross, is there in a dying state. And that is the state of our consciousness. Our Christ consciousness is hung upon our cross, AKA our body, in a sleeping, dying state. But when we resurrect that consciousness, there will be what the Bible calls the second birth, the second birth coming in your life. Or as the Buddhists talk about, the awakening. When this awakening takes place, which a whole other tangent on this subject is like, how does that even happen? I think that's a whole nother thing we should talk about. How can you even wake up from this sleeping state? But when you do, and if you are chosen by spirit to wake up from this sleeping state, Then when the sun rises again, the metaphor of astrology comes back in. It now begins to bring new life upon the planet, because now God has awakened within you. The Christ within you, which recognizes itself as a creation of God, the creator. Now God is in the body. Now God is physically awake in your life. And then when you use this to now begin to manifest in your life, abundance not only takes place in your life, but begins to take place in the entire reality. Because why else? You know, God doesn't want to just limit his abundance to one corner of the universe. It's all about awakening the entire reality. That's the ultimate journey. After one man wakes up, then the reality wakes up.
I like what he said about how we measure the day from midnight to midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And if we transpose that onto the year, the darkest, deepest time of the year that would be like midnight is the winter solstice.
Yes.
Is December 21st. And then you have the 3 days later,
Mm-hmm.
the 25th, which is what we celebrate as Christmas. I learned from Alexander Shaya that was the day that was chosen as the birthday, because even though the midnight of the year, the shortest day, the longest night, the darkest, coldest point in the year is winter solstice, December 21st. It's 3 days later that if you're standing outside to the naked eye, you can actually see the light starting to come back in.
Yeah.
Or like the morning starting to come back in, like the awakening, the day that's coming, the hope that's coming.
Yeah.
That is why the Roman Empire decided to celebrate the birth of Christ on the 25th, because it was such a celebratory day anyway, because the sun was rising and there was hope of a new year beginning. So what they did is they decided, well, this is when we're going to celebrate the Christ first return, or the first coming of Christ. So that's, and we'll get into Advent, but I've got a lot of notes about why Advent began. I knew nothing before this week. So I am I'm just spouting out facts that I learn myself. But I am really, one of the biggest, do we cuss on this one? I'm not going to cuss.
We have definitely cussed on previous episodes.
Oh, yeah. I think all of our episodes are labeled explicit on the podcast website.
One of the mind warping things for me that I came across a few years ago. I love Egypt history, the stories behind it. I'm just I really do. I'm an Egypt geek. And so I was watching some show about Egypt a few years ago, and I learned watching this that when Egyptians, when they died, they didn't have a word for death. There was no death. Death did not exist. So and a lot of ancient Christians believe that too. There is no death. People fall asleep. But in Egyptian culture, people went westing, Westing. And it's because the sun sets in the west, and then they would wait for that person's return in the east, and they would pray, or they would ask the gods or the spiritual beings to protect this person as they went into Hades or in the underworld. Mm-hmm. Because our soul, there's a belief that our soul journeys after it's passing from this body into the next spiritual realm. So they'd call it westing, because the death, the passing, represents it's in the west, right? So we've got all of these astrological phenomena happening that correlate to west east. The first coming, the second coming. The Advent is all about Christ's first return and then Christ's second return. Mm-hmm. And so we can unpack that any way you want to, but I really thought it was interesting that the Egyptians, they also had that idea of watching the sun and how it went down. They were so into the death of the sun, for 3 days, and then the rising of the return, the resurrection of the sun on the 25th.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Joseph Campbell even points out how this is a worldwide myth. Most of this mythology takes place in the Northern Hemisphere. Joseph Campbell also talks about that quite a bit. And especially like Neville laid out, the Hebrew mythology and the Christian mythology is all in the Northern Hemisphere. But this is worldwide because we're talking about the sun.
I do want to point out, though, for anybody listening, the Christian mythology, the idea of Christian being on the 20th, Christ being born on the 25th, and that whole idea of like Santa Claus and reindeer, and there's so much around all that. I personally do believe that Christ entered the world through the Virgin Mary. This is just a personal belief of mine. But I do believe that happened in September, or I think I can't remember when it happened, but it was like definitely not in December. So I think when people get caught up in, I remember being a little girl and waking up and singing happy birthday to Jesus every single Christmas morning. And as I got older, I remember like not doing that anymore. And I was like, wow, I'm a really bad person because I don't sing happy birthday to Jesus on Christmas morning. And it's just this idea in the West, especially in the Christian walls and the Christian churches, that it's great. We are honoring this birth, or this, as you say, Kevin, like this Christ consciousness that is now ascended upon earth. For me, it's like the actual Christ figure that came as a divine being of God. But it doesn't matter which way we're coming at. It's about this enlightened state that took place on earth, but it didn't happen on December 25th. And that's, for me, that's the big thing that I think a lot of people get tripped up about. That's why I do feel like Advent and the idea around it is actually really beautiful, which again, I knew nothing about it until like a week ago. So
Yeah. Also, for any Christians out there that may feel a little triggered by this subject, I want to just throw out that what we're talking about is not meant to negate anything. We want to expand our understanding of this story. So
yeah, and I want those that feel triggered to know that I can be your advocate, or I can help, answer any questions that you might have around that, because I might feel probably the same way you do, whoever's getting triggered right now about this, because there's Christ coming to earth and God incarnating as a man, as a human fleshly. There's so much mystery. There's so much mystical things around this. It's so much deeper than what we're taught in church walls, or even just opening up Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah.
Well, and the date of celebration, even when I was growing up, I do remember the church I grew up in, I guess, was like a little more progressive than a lot of churches, because there was a conversation of, yes, Jesus was most likely born in August or September, but we picked this day because of all of the other symbology that's around it, because of the sun, because of the reminder that the Christ gives us of, in our darkest time, there is always light, there is always hope, and waking back up again. Yeah. And it was kind of like, I remember like my mom describing it to me, how I had a friend that had a birthday like the week of Christmas. And so her family never wanted to celebrate her birthday that week because it would get covered up by all of the Christmas festivities. So they would always have her birthday party in the middle of summer break.
Oh, cool.
And it was like, yeah. And it was like, oh yeah, we're just choosing to celebrate at a different time. It didn't mean that she wasn't actually getting a year older. It was just, we were giving notice to it at a different time. So I do the actual date of like fact checking when the person of Jesus was born does not deter me from celebrating the beauty of the holiday.
And my reaction to that is I feel like getting caught up on these quote unquote historical semantics are yet again missing the point of the myth, because the point of the myth is the Christ in you. And the point of telling the myth and the story of Christ is to reveal that this is also your journey. This exact same thing is going to happen in your life. Your consciousness, the Christ consciousness within you, is dead on the cross, sleeping in your body. not yet awake. It's through your life's journey to go towards waking up that consciousness within you. And when you do, the resurrection of that consciousness will be mind-blowing and profound and have huge impacts on your life. And the reason why I like to describe it from that angle is because this is what a lot of world mythologies are trying to describe. This is the hero's journey that is being talked about in so many different cultures. And so when Christianity makes the story of Christ all about one historical man, it immediately removes it from us interpreting the story as this is potentially a story about me. And the church will already be screaming at me trying to say that. But the story of Christ is the spiritual journey of every walking and living soul. God was born as a human in every single one of us. God was not born in one human and that's it. I can't get behind that belief. I believe that spirit is deeply imbued in everyone, everything, every part of manifestation is only made manifest because of spirit. So
and to me,
Christ
that's why
told us
scripture
that,
says, yeah, we're made in God's image. I feel like that is apparent also in the Bible.
Yeah. And Jesus says, ye are gods. He also says, everything you've seen me do, you will do and more. Christ himself is never claiming exclusivity as far as having this relationship with God. Christ himself is always saying, you are connected to God. If you clear out your ego, if you defeat the Satan within you, all that's left is God. So that's what I wanted to say.
I also really like what was said. It's beautiful. Thank you. One of you said the line that the sun dies on the 21st, stays buried for 3 days. I think it was UKK, and then comes back on the 25th and is resurrected, which is foreshadowing, of course, what happens a few months later in the story of Easter. And that is just a really, really cool poetry of that the metaphor is repeated there to remind us, not just like you said about what was coming for the man of Jesus, but for each of us, that the awakening comes after we die to ourselves. And there is that kind of dormant period, and to not lose faith in that time, because there is always a resurrection. And that's so beautiful. And I was curious, KK, how that relates to Advent, because you mentioned that it's about the first coming and the second coming. And does it tie into the story of Easter? I'm not familiar. So if you could give us a little crash course in Advent.
From my limited amount of knowledge, I did find this interesting because I love St. Francis of Assisi, as we've quoted him on here before. But the whole nativity scene that we display in our yards and our houses, it was first brought about by him in 1223. And so that idea of Christ in the manger and all the people around, we have this idea that it was just Joseph, Jesus, and Mary, and then a bunch of animals. But there was a lot of people there. There was a lot of people witnessing and helping and, at the physical birth. So we do have these almost storybook-like images that just are non-existent. And if you want to live in storybook land, that's fine. But just, I would hope that people would say, wow, I really have just kind of hook, line, and sinker, just eaten and digested all of the commercial Western philosophies around what Christmas is. And so if you want to live in that world, go for it. I hope you have a good time. But at the same time, knowledge or ignorance isn't really bliss. And being ignorant today around a subject isn't something that, for me, I just look at somebody and do you just not like to read? Or do you just not like to What are you spending your time on? And so if we are entering into the Christmas season, what image do you have of what's actually taking place, and what are you celebrating? Are you just here for the gifts and to give family time? Some people are like that, some people are atheists, and they see it as a time to get together with their family and watch Christmas movies. I think know thyself is just a beautiful it's a beautiful expression. And so know why you're doing something, or if you're going to celebrate Christmas, why are you celebrating it? And so I've never celebrated Advent ever. And I feel like this year I'm like, Advent is everywhere. I'm like, everybody's celebrating Advent. I think, Taylor, you and I have a mutual friend who is doing like Advent couples suggestions every single day. And I'm just like, what is all this about? I don't know what this is. So Advent, like I said earlier, was created, or its first exposure was by the Roman Empire as a celebration, coupled on top of just the winter solstice and the rising of the sun, right? Like the celebration. So they were like, let's throw it on the 25th so we make it a celebration. So the first,
can I just point out, I love like the winter solstice and the winter celebration was totally already a celebration that was happening at this time before the Roman Catholic Church said, hey, let's make this Jesus's birthday.
Oh, absolutely.
It was from further, it was from further north of the Roman Empire. That's what I learned from Alexander Shia, more of like the Celtic pagan traditions. And then they said, that's a really fun festival. We're gonna claim that now.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
I was listening to a podcast the other day about like where reindeers and the old cards of like reindeers with like the mushrooms, because the reindeers really liked the magic mushrooms that grew in that area.
Oh, yeah.
And they would
psychedelic reindeers.
love to eat these mushrooms.
None of these psychedelic reindeers. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Absolutely. This is a real thing that happened. And you can like kind of Google.
No wonder people thought they were flying.
That's totally going in our description of this podcast. Psychedelic reindeers.
Well, every time I see a reindeer now, I'm like, you like to eat mushrooms. So, okay, back to Advent. So
flying reindeer. Oh my gosh. Okay.
I'm not exactly sure when the cutoff is, but there's like the beginning of Advent that's celebrated is to prepare oneself for this coming of Christ, this birth, as you would say. And then the last part of Advent is to prepare oneself for the second coming of Christ. So that can be interpreted in a lot of different routes, depending on what religion you are or what way of thinking you are. We could look at that as like all kinds of things, as you can imagine. But that is what Advent's about. And so a lot of people that I listen to, kind of like spiritual leaders or thinkers, they were just like, we never claimed that Jesus was actually born on the 25th, but what this does is it creates this remembrance within one's heart of, are you living your life for Christmas as a spiritual, from a spiritual aspect or perspective, or is this more just commercialism and consumerism and if it's not spiritual, don't celebrate Advent, but that's what Advent does. It's like creating like a meditation room or a temple, it's like you go into that space. Wayne Dyer always says, like, when you pray or you meditate, go to the same space every single day, because you are priming your body to remember that is where you're meeting spirit. That's where you're meeting God every day. So in a way, it kind of reminds me of like, maybe Advent is that same thing of like, oh, we are going to help you remember what this season is actually about. Beautiful. So by conducting these practices every day, you'll remember.
About
Love
awakening.
That. Bring the spirit back into Christmas. Yeah.
I'm just making sure I'm understanding what you're saying. The actual Advent is about. It's about remembrance of Christ? Just maybe summarize one more time, because I don't know if I got a super clear picture. Summarize just what you're saying.
From my understanding, and please, anyone listening, correct me, but it's the preparation for the first coming of Christ, and also the preparation of the second coming of Christ.
Got it.
The preparing ourselves and the awareness of our spirits for that to take place, instead of getting swept up in a lot of the like materialism that can be associated with this time of year.
You could definitely
a way to like slow down and create like a ritual.
Yeah, because as you know, you could be completely non-spiritual or non-religious and celebrate Christmas. So I think this Advent was created. I'm not really sure what's happened to it now, but I think it's, the chocolate calendars, like what the fuck are those about? How's chocolate calendars helping? I mean, I guess
I love a chocolate calendar.
Right.
I don't think it's being.
Who doesn't want an excuse to get chocolate every day? But it's not about spirit. I mean, it's more just about me wanting candy.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that is. And you know what? It's up to you and how you want to interpret what that first coming or that second coming is for you. Because you cannot celebrate Advent and still celebrate Christmas, because Santa Claus is coming, and the news is definitely going to tell you where he is in the sky, because we should believe everything the news tells us.
Right. But Christmas is canceled because of COVID. I don't know if you guys got that message.
Oh yeah.
No Santa this year. I know.
No, but I have seen pictures of.
I'm just saying what Gavin Newsom is talking about.
I have seen pictures of people
no water for
bringing
you.
Their kids. People are bringing their kids to see Santa, but Santa's behind a plexiglass wall, and he looks like he's in like a zoo habitat.
Oh my God.
Which I'm like, okay, I get, like, most of the people playing Santa are elderly, like, because that's like, we don't want to endanger them, but also it looks so silly because they're like.
Yo, if people out there listening to us have not seen this, go search on YouTube or go to Bass Pro's website. They made a commercial that I shared with KK a while back. They made this commercial about having Santa in their Bass Pro shops. And it is so, it feels like it's from an SNL skit, but it
really does. I can't believe it's real.
Imagine a Santa on his, like, in his Santa chair with the whole setup behind him. And then there's a glass wall right in front of him. And these kids also wearing masks coming up to this glass wall and just like putting their hands on the wall, and Santa just like doing his thing. It's like a 30-second commercial, but it's disturbing as fuck.
Find a lot of joy in the silliness of it. Like when we look back at Christmas 2020, it's just going to be really funny. All of these Santa pictures.
I hope we don't look back and get nervous in the route that humanity took. The same way as like, and hey, we're talking about Christmas, but looking back at 2020, I hope we don't look back at like images of like propaganda from World War II or from Vietnam, and then sorry, I gotta say it's how I feel. So
I'm sure we will. I'm sure we'll look back, and
but I don't think that's
like in any time period we'll be like, oh yeah, that's what the cartoon caricatures looked like from this side of the argument, and this is what they look like from this side, and it's just part of history. It's just part of how people communicated. There's going to be stuff that shows all kinds of perspectives.
My hope is that we do come out of it, and that in Christmas of 2021, we're not doing the same shit. That's what I hope.
Well, yeah.
Man.
But I hear it's 2022 before we'll be out of it.
Oh God. Well, I wanted to react on the materialism part of what we were talking about with Advent and Christmas. I think that it's very interesting. If you really understand the landscape of the Bible and of the Christian story, it kind of opposes itself to materialism. It's all about leaving everything. One other famous Jesus quote when talking about a parable, he says, it'll be easier, it's something about, it's insanely difficult for a rich man to get
for a rich man to fit through the head of a needle.
Well, yeah, it's saying
to get rid of
God,
all
I
of
can't
his
remember
stuff
the
and
exact
follow him.
poetry of it, but yeah, the whole can't go through the eye of a needle. A camel can't go through the eye of the
They
needle.
say the camel, but that's an interpretation of scripture incorrectly. It's actually
Yeah.
supposed to be a rope.
Yes.
If you go back historically, but a rope makes more sense. You can't put a rope through the head of a needle, but you
Right.
can put a thread. So
So the eye of the needle was an actual geographic location
Are you
that
serious?
for a camel, yeah, it was like a hole in a mountain that was on this path that people would have to go through to get to where they were going. But a camel couldn't fit through. So for a camel to fit through the eye of the needle, you would have to break its legs and shove its torso through.
This is
And
terrifying.
so that's the metaphor of, you know, getting rid of the stuff that is so important to you, or the stuff that you hold so dear.
I'd like to know where that came from, because I've always heard
no idea
that when the Bible was actually written and they translated it, the translation from like Greek to Hebrew, or from Hebrew to Arabic, like there was this camel and rope are similar, like there's genders identified with it, and as it translated, like, because that doesn't make sense if you think about it, like we're just talking like, yeah, put that camel through the eye of the hole of the needle, and it's like, why would we say that? So your story makes perfect sense.
That is kind of the point of the metaphor too, is he's saying it'll be easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it will be for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. So there is
but if we said it was a
his
rope,
attachment on his stuff,
right?
Instead of it being a camel, it could have been a rope. It'd be harder for than a rope to go through.
It's a challenging puzzle.
It's challenging.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the point, at least the point I was trying to bring in by bringing that up and totally botching the reference on my part, but I was attempting to bring up that the Jesus story is talking about anti-materialism, spirituality on one side, materialism on the other side, and trying to transcend our materialistic self, that we are more than just our five senses. We are more than just the gains that we experience in the material world. So I find it interesting, and dare I even say Luciferian, that Christian is now synonymous with materialism. That in fact, you can celebrate materialism and call it Christmas without ever celebrating the spiritual understanding of Christ.
One of my favorite ideas around the nativity scene was the three wise kings, right? And they came with their gifts. But actually, it was the three magi. And the three magi were supposed to be from far east. And they followed this astrological conjunction in the sky, which looked like, the North Star or whatever. What kind of star was it?
The Star of Bethlehem.
Thank you.
We call it.
Yes.
Yeah. I have theories about that I want to share later.
Sure.
When I heard that they were magi and not three wise kings, as we've been taught from really young age, it really brought the magical, or kind of the mystery behind the gifts themselves, like frankincense, myrrh, and what's the other one? Gold? Gold.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, we're going to say gold.
Did you?
Actually, it was just frankincense and myrrh, I believe.
That movie, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, this old musical, and there were seven brothers, and all of them were named alphabetically, names from the Bible. So like Adam, and then I don't remember what Benjamin. But when they got to F, they didn't have a name, so they named him Frank because they named him frankincense.
That's awesome.
That's good.
But as we know, frankincense and myrrh, I don't know if anyone's ever bought a bottle of frankincense, like pure frankincense. It is expensive. It is money. And so these were very fine gifts that were presented, and there can be some type of, like, if you want to think about alchemy and the convergent of, there's all, like, what do you do with those three things? And that is something, in my opinion, we should think about, like, Christ from a Christian biblical stance, Christ coming down as God in man, right? Why did three magi come to him and offer him these three gifts, right? And so it has nothing to do with this. You know, if they really cared about Jesus, they should have given him a sweater and a pacifier and some little cute booties, but they didn't, you know? So it's like, that's the idea for me, is like with Christmas and Christmas gifts, maybe they should be more symbolic and less materialistic, in the sense of like, this is from today's perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always heard they were gifts for a king. Like they were recognizing his royal kingdom, the kingdom of God in this young infant.
Yeah. You're making me think of when my little nephew was born, we got him a onesie that said, "Not my first rodeo." But I think if I gave a onesie to Jesus, I think I might have to say, this actually is my first rodeo. You know, a little bad Christian joke there for you. Yeah, super interesting stuff,
So,
KK.
also,
I think those gifts, I would be interested to know if there's more symbolism behind those gifts.
I just figured something out. I'm super excited about it. And I could be like, people could be listening to this and just being like, wow, she is an idiot. But
no one thinks that.
That story or that song, We Three Kings of Orient Are.
Mm-hmm.
Orient means from Asian.
From the East.
From Eastern Asian descent, or belonging to the Oriental. So it's like, why have we always depicted these like guys from like Persia or Turkey on their camels coming? Like, why do we not depict them with like more Eastern Asian type of features?
Well, they did walk there
on the Silk Road
over the course of probably a couple of years. Well, that's what I've heard. Like they didn't arrive at the actual birth. They would have arrived after their journey there. It would have taken a couple of years. Like Jesus might have been more of like a toddler at that point.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how far they were coming from. I'm not sure when the song We Three Kings was written or how accurate the description of Orient is to describe these gentlemen. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But somewhere further east than Bethlehem, I think.
Well, it was written in 1857, everyone.
Pretty darn recently.
Wow. It's an old song.
Well, I said pretty recently, and you said it's really old.
It's 1857? I mean,
I just meant compared to like the actual birth of Jesus.
Oh, well, yeah, much more recent than that, in 2000
So
years.
it has two names, actually.
The song?
The song has two. So We Three Kings is the original title. But it's also known as Three Kings of Orient, or the Quest of the Magi.
Ooh,
I like that name. I'm just going to call it that from now on.
The Quest of the Magi.
I will say one of my favorite Christmas songs. I also want to hear your guys' favorite Christmas songs. Well, I know OnenO loves Joy to the World by Whitney Houston.
Do.
But
that's so amazing.
But okay, and don't freaking roll your eyes when I say this.
Santa Baby.
No.
Oh God.
The Bare Naked Ladies.
Okay.
The Bare Naked Ladies have a duet. It's get your hand off your mouth. With Sarah McLachlan of We Three Kings. And it's really good. Yes, it's really
amazing.
Good. I like.
What year did that come out?
Do what?
1857.
1857.
I don't know. It's really good though.
90s.
Look it up.
Pretty rad.
It's a good one. So if you want to hear a newer version of The Quest of the Magi, check out The Bare Naked Ladies featuring Sarah McLachlan.
100% yes. Totally checking that out. Obviously, Joy to the World is my favorite by Whitney Houston. But if you out there,
you brought that up on a non-Christmas themed episode.
I did. Yeah, I brought that up as my favorite pump-up song. Like when I'm in kind of this lull or semi-depressed state, I use that song to literally pump my vibration full of positive energy. I mean, they change these keys towards the end of the song. They change keys like 3 times, and every time it's just like,
very powerful.
God, and Whitney Houston
Well,
is the best.
and the scene in the movie, the preacher's wife, while they're singing it, is like they're getting all pumped up, but also I think like the heater in the basement's like about to explode, so you've got that anxiety going too, and it's like
Nice.
everybody's sweating, and
Oh yeah, big payoff.
it's so dramatic. It's wonderful.
I also, when I was younger, I really did like the song "Mary, Did You Know?" You guys know that
Oh
tune?
yeah.
That one, just as far as like beautiful and semi-emotional song, that just was,
That's a
it always
beautiful
just hit me in
song.
the heart, that song, for some reason, to think about it from this real perspective of like a mother and her child, and then her child ends up being the savior of the known world.
The humanness it brings to the story is so beautiful in the perspective of this like young teenage girl. Like, how were you coping with this?
And your husband, Joseph, was like literally going to divorce you when you told him you're pregnant. And then an angel of the Lord came to him and said, this is accurate. And
Call off the engagement at least.
Like, how's that for backup? Here, just send Gabriel on over there.
It's my wingman. You were gonna.
Michelangelo.
yeah.
Yeah, Mary, did you know?
Did you have a favorite Christmas song, or KK, or was yours?
Side story, a distant uncle of mine ran a church, an inner city church when I was younger, where he would preach, and anybody was allowed to come, and then we would supply like a huge lunch buffet afterwards. And it really was for like more of the homeless community, but they had to come in and they had to listen to the service. And of course, there was an invitation to salvation at the end of each one. So I went to this church for a very I would say like 2 years. No, a year. Let's say a year. My mom would make me go, and it was beautiful. It was a great ministry for like inner city. But the pastor had a daughter who was like 8, and every Sunday she would sing "Mary, Did You Know?" every single Sunday.
Wow, that's too much.
Not Christmas time?
No, every Sunday.
Year round.
In the worst key possible. So I like have PTSD when I hear that song.
No.
I'm like, oh my God, you ruined it.
Yeah, they definitely ruined it.
I really like Run, Rudolph, Run.
Look at you.
All right. Pulling out the deep cuts.
Those real philosophical.
Santa's gonna make it to town.
I also like
I did not expect you to say that.
I also like Rocking Around the Christmas Tree.
Of course, you like this like rock and
I like
roll
that one too.
Christmas song.
I do like that one from Home Alone. That's my favorite
Yeah.
part of Home Alone. Setting up all the toys.
So my favorite Christmas song is.
Wait, I thought you already gave us you have a second
did.
favorite? I thought it was
that was a favorite. It's not the favorite.
All right, let's go into Taylor's list of
I would
Christmas
be
songs.
remiss if I did not share my actual favorite Christmas song with you guys. Please don't rob me of this experience.
No, I'm not. I just had to haze you for a second.
Sleeping at Last. It's called Snow. Oh my gosh. I just like bawl every time. It's a slow one. Oh, it's good. It's the opposite vibe of all of KK's favorites.
Amazing.
Oh, and there's a line that says, like petals in our pockets, we remember who we are, which is a nod to It's a Wonderful Life, because he has Zuzu's petals in his pockets when he's like contemplating ending his life on the bridge in the snow. And it's so emo and beautiful.
Yeah, love it. All right, I got another one. Since we're doing two, I got
fine.
another one that's like totally one of my favorites. Is the Trans-Siberian Orchestra when they do the Carol of the Bells. Bam, 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 bam. When I was in high school, that shit rocked my brain off. And I have a really funny story about this I'd love to share. So when I was younger, I had a really bad, like, I don't know if it's a condition or whatever, but I would mix up words all the time that sounded similar. For instance, one time I was trying to tell somebody who was inviting me over to play music at their party that I would come serenade them, but instead I told them I would come marinade them. Two very different things, I found out. So
Oh my God.
I was about 13 when I heard this Trans-Siberian Orchestra song for the very first time. And I heard it on the radio. I was trying to tell my parents about it. I was like, we got to look up this song. I think this song is by some band called the Transvestite Orchestra. And they were like,
That's how you know
sure
it's
that's
good.
not what you're meaning to say.
Oh man, that is priceless.
This is
Yeah.
not a Christmas story, but I really have to share it. I was in middle school and I was on the phone after a family movie night talking to the boy that I had a crush on. And I knew that he was into sci-fi movies. And that night as a family, before he and I were talking on the phone, we had watched with my parents Star Trek Insurrection.
Classic.
And so I was telling, she's laughing. So I was like, oh yeah, we watched a Star Trek movie tonight. And he was like, oh, what movie? And I was like, Star Trek Erection.
Oh no.
And
Oh God. Oh,
and
no.
he started laughing so hard. And I was like, what is that not? Is that not the movie?
Oh,
And he just
no.
goes, go ask your dad. And then hung up the phone.
Oh, perfect.
Oh man, that is great. Okay, I have one too, and it's not Christmas related.
I love this.
Lady Gaga song. I still don't know the name of it, but it was a big hit, one of her big hits, and it goes, I say it's Papa Roxy. Papa Roxy. Paparazzi. It's paparazzi. Do you know that song, Paparazzi?
Yes.
Yes, everybody. Okay, yeah.
He goes, yes,
Now I know what
everybody
you're
knows
talking
that song.
about. Yes. Yes.
I was at my friend's house and I was like, Papa Roxy. And they were like, hold on, what are you saying? And I was like, Papa Roxy. And they're like, no, it's paparazzi. And I was like, I still, like, even as I was about to tell you guys a story, I was like, what is it called?
You still get it mixed
In
up?
my head, it is 2 words. It's Papa, and Papa's name is Roxy, Roxi. Papa
Yeah.
Roxy.
Mr.
Oh, yeah.
Roxy.
Oh
Senior.
yeah. It's very silent.
But
Wow.
Papa.
I got murdered when I,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
funny.
okay.
All right, I feel like we
Christmas.
need to reel back in. Is there anything else on this
I do- I have
Christmas
a thing.
subject?
I have
Okay,
a thing
Taylor,
to share
take the
about
mic.
winter solstice of this year
Yes.
coming up, December 21st. I don't know if you guys have heard, something is happening astrologically
Oh, I'm
called
freaking out now. I don't listen to star things.
Oh yeah, Taylor, you lost KK.
Yeah,
the Great Convergence.
Yes.
No,
December
the
20th.
Great Conjunction.
The Great Conjunction.
Oh yes.
That's not what
yes.
it's called. Speaking of saying the wrong thing. The Great Conjunction, right?
Yeah,
Oh
God,
God,
now I
now
don't
we're
remember what
all
it's
second
called.
guessing ourselves.
it is conjunction.
It's
Yes,
conjunction.
yes, yes. Mhm.
It's conjunction. Okay. So the Great Conjunction is happening. This happens very loosely every 20 years, but the intensity at which this is happening, where Saturn and Jupiter are coming together and you can view them through a telescope, they will pass within 1/5 of the diameter of the moon. This is freaking close together to the naked eye, or to the, not a naked eye, a telescope. This like level of intensity only happens every 400 years.
Whoa.
Mhm.
So interestingly, I have something to share about it. Okay. So astrologically, I'm just going to say one woo-woo thing, and then I'm going to move on to actual
You
science
do
and
know that
history.
we have a woo-woo podcast that we're
I know.
talking on right now,
I
right?
feel like I need a disclaimer. So the sign that they will be in is Aquarius. And so what a lot of astrologers are saying is that when this happens on winter solstice of this year, when this conjunction happens, it will set the tone for what unfolds for the next 100 years and 100 years after that.
Hmm.
And the tone is that of societal reformation and more egalitarian and more optimism about the future,
Good.
according to the sign of Aquarius. I think that sounds incredibly appropriate for this time period and also like super cool.
Mhm.
So when I was learning about great conjunctions, I learned that there was one that happened that was actually a triple conjunction. So every so often, Saturn and Jupiter will come in close contact. Based on our perspective, it will look like one of them is in retrograde a little bit, and then they will cross again. So they actually end up crossing paths like 3 times within 7 months of each other.
Whoa.
One of these big triple conjunctions happened in the year 7 BC, which is earlier than Jesus was born. However, some historians and astrophysicists think that that could have been the crazy astrological thing that guided the visitors from the east to the west. Because when they saw the first conjunction happen to the time, which was in May, I think, of that year, and then there was another one in September when it went back the other way. The final one was in December. So it would have been 7 months from when they saw it happen. They followed it from Jerusalem and then Jerusalem on to Bethlehem. And then the final time would have been in December. So some people think that that was what represented the Star of Bethlehem.
Oh, wow.
I have heard that as well.
Which is kind of cool.
That is very cool.
And that also would have been based on, I don't know if that one was in the sign of Aquarius or not, but if it mirrors the one that we're experiencing this year, societal reformation, optimism about the future, more of an egalitarian society, all of those themes would also reflect what was happening in Christ's time on earth.
Yeah.
So
can I also just say that all of the children that are born this coming 21st of December during this conjunction, can we just elect all of them for political office?
They're really set up for success.
Yeah, maybe they'll have some special sauce that we're kind of missing right now.
Some special sauce.
Like, compassion and forgiveness, stuff like that.
Just like beautiful human traits.
Yeah.
This is kind of cool. Because if this is kind of like, because I've heard the same thing, Taylor, and I understand people say all types of things. So I do try my best to not believe everything I hear, but the sources, and anyway, that disclaimer's over. Get to the goods. If this is the ushering in of the age of Aquarius, I just Googled what age was Jesus born, and it says the age of Pisces. Which is the symbol of the fish, which makes a lot of sense as to why that was thank you, Kevin. That is why that was the secret symbol for underground Christians of that time and after his death.
Oh my God, that's so awesome. Oh, I also loved the takeaway from when you were reading Mr. Goddard earlier of that the sign that they would have been looking north to see. Did you say
they were looking north? No, they were looking east, but it's from the northern hemisphere's perspective.
Oh, okay. That's what east. So that it would have been the sign of Virgo, which is a sign of the Virgin, which is why we associate the virgin birth with that story. I had never heard that before.
I know. Me too. That's why this has stuck out in my mind for so long. I read that book of Neville's years ago, maybe like 3 years ago. And it's just stuck in my brain ever since, because I'm like, holy shit, really the symbolism is amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Love that really stuff. Cool. So is there anything else to know about the conjunction?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot to know about it. I don't personally know anything else about it, but if people want to look into it, it's fascinating.
Well, as far as planetary stuff too, the day that we're recording this podcast is Monday, December 14th. And this morning there was a solar eclipse that happened down visible in Argentina. But so that's why everybody's saying today, the 14th, 1 week prior to the 21st, or that'd be, 1 week prior.
Yeah.
And we have a full-blown solar eclipse happening. And then we have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happening on the solstice, which is, I mean, let's just talk about that too, because that means that conjunction is happening with our sun as well. It's not that visibly they'll be aligned, But for us on the
It's
Earth,
within 30 degrees of the sun, though. It actually is
Mhm.
really close to being in line with the sun, so much so that it's going to be really hard to see because the sun's going to block our view of it.
Oh,
So
wow.
the best time to view it is actually just after sunset, for between like 30 minutes to 2 hours after sunset,
So cool.
through a telescope. And the man that I was learning this from, who is an astrophysicist at the University of Exeter in England, said, remember, don't look at the sun with your telescope.
Do we have to remind people? I guess we do have to remind people.
Wait
of that.
until the sun sets,
Yeah.
and then look in that general direction of
Yes.
Saturn and Jupiter.
I found a really fascinating site on astrobutterfly.com.
Sounds reputable.
They kind of break down different eras of history versus like the different ages, astrological ages that could have been during that time. So for example, if we are indeed, because there is this idea that maybe we've already entered the age of Aquarius, which I heard a couple of like months ago. So we could already be in it, but this would be kind of like, it would make sense that this would be like, oh, now we're definitely in it because of this conjunction that's happening that's so very rare.
Mhm.
But it says every 2,150 years, we enter into a new age. And so for those listening, it would be like looking at that. And if you don't think that this stuff is important, it's been so important in history, but it's still important today. It is not a lost science or mode of thought. It's just one that isn't honored or talked about. And there's a reason why our society says I hate when I say they, but they, it is easier to control people when they're dumb than it is if they're enlightened or understand something bigger outside of themselves. So if we really understand our significance to the stars and to the planets and to the solar system, how much more effective would we be in really being more independent and not, we really understood our connection with Mother Earth and our connection with that, and what is Mother Earth's connection with other planets and other galaxies. So anyway, all of these signs and some, okay, real quick, I'm just going to go because I'll just keep talking. This is really interesting. So the age of Leo was thought to be the Great Golden Age, which is when the Ice Age ended and the climate began warming up, which would make sense. This is when we, as a culture, worship the sun. This could also be like the Sphinx. The Sphinx actually had the head of a lion. We, in modern day, ancient modern day, actually took it off and put the face of a human on the Sphinx. But historically, you can go real far back, it had the face of a lion. So that would make a little bit more sense, which the Sphinx was it was there so much longer than the pyramids. Pyramids came way later than the Sphinx did, like the creation of the Sphinx. So then we have the age of Cancer, which is just the great mother and the goddess worship from all over the world. The age of Gemini is thought to be the emergence of myths and stories about twins or duality, such as Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Enki and Enlil. Do you know what that is?
Enlil.
Enlil. Is that in Epic of Gilgamesh?
Not familiar about that part, but I know those names, yeah.
Age of Taurus was the when banking and money were invented. Age of Aries was the Iron Age. Anyway, astrobutterfly.com. Go give it a whirl. It's a lot of fun. I'll probably deep dive into that later today.
Amazing.
Well, and the other thing, so 400 years ago in the early 1600s, when we had the last great conjunction of this degree, was during a huge point of scientific and artistic revelation. I mean, that's when Galileo was there. So if we want to talk about like the potency that these two biggest planets in our solar system have for shifting around and upheaval for the way that we do things and the way that we understand things. It's right on the money, timeline wise.
Cool.
And they move slow. Like
They're very slow.
super slow. So the fact that they're both slow moving planets and then we get to see them at that alignment part, like it's super rare. It's definitely a treat.
I mean, their orbits seem to be really slow comparatively to like Mercury and Venus and Earth, because ours are so much shorter. They're whipping around, but they're way the heck out there, man. They got a lot further to travel.
I don't know how to Google search this fast enough, but I remember something like Jupiter takes what we call 1 year, which is one trip around the sun in our orbit. Jupiter is something like 400 years, earthly years, is one trip for Jupiter around the sun. I think KK is trying to find it.
She's
KK is kind of like our Jamie from the Joe Rogan
hear
podcast.
The click clacking.
Sorry, I'm trying to look up what.
Yeah, how long is Jupiter's year?
I find this interesting. I'm sorry.
I'm going to look that up.
No, all good. What are you looking up, KK?
I wanted to know because each planet represents something, right? And each one has a feminine or masculine attachment to it. And so I do know that Saturn is known as like more masculine, and it is the planet of destruction and recreation, I believe. So that's what I'm looking up. And I don't know much about Jupiter. So
in Greek mythology, they symbolize Saturn as Kronos, which is the father of time. And also
stealer of time.
Yeah, I'll leave Saturn symbolism aside for this episode. There's a lot of really negative and kind of weird shit about Saturn, how it's been symbolized.
The black cube, are you familiar with that?
Oh my gosh, what's happening?
I'm trying to save that maybe for another
also
episode.
Jupiter's orbital period is 12 Earth years.
Is it? Oh, so not 400? Oh God. I was way off.
So
12 Earth years.
Samsonite, I was way off.
I mean, I've been to Saturn, guys.
Oh gosh.
Oh really? I feel like
I might have been on a substance, but literally took me to Saturn.
I did have something to say about Galileo. So because of where the sun was at this great conjunction 400 years ago, they would not have been able to see it at the time that they were really close, because the sun would have blocked it out. And so before that, the telescope wasn't invented. So if we look at this great conjunction through a telescope this coming week, we will be the first humans to have ever actually seen it.
No way.
No way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at through the telescope too soon, you'll be the first human to go blind while attempting to see it.
You would not be the first humans to go blind
by
looking at the sun through a telescope. Yeah. Is there anything else we want to say about Christmas and what Christmas means to us these days?
I feel like this is a good wrapping up point. I think, I'm super grateful you guys let me share all that Neville Goddard stuff, because that's the biggest thing that just blew my mind when I first read that book.
I do want to recommend people who are listening to go to Rob Bell's podcast called The Robcast and scroll back the last, I don't know if there's 2, 3, or 4 years of them, but they kind of have taken on this tradition of Alexander Shaya comes in December and they talk about Advent and they talk about the history of Christmas, and they're fabulous episodes. I highly, highly recommend looking up Alexander Shaya episodes on the Robcast.
That's great. Cool. Yeah.
If you have a road trip and you like really want to get in the zone,
Yeah, just do it. Well, I think we're going to wrap up here. I know KK is going to lead us in a meditation, but what we've decided to do with our meditations moving forward with the podcast is we're going to do a separate audio recording for the meditation portion and post it on wherever you find our podcast, whether that's Spotify or iTunes. You'll see we're now going to be releasing the podcast episode, and then immediately following another post will be the meditation itself. So that way, if you want to save the meditation for later, you can just pop in and play the meditation. You don't have to scroll like an hour and a half into the podcast to try to find it. So that's what we're going to do. So for the moment, this is the end of our podcast. And if you want to do the meditation with KK, just pop to the next post here on your podcast platform.
And send us an email at the rememberingpodcast@gmail.com. We really want to hear your thoughts and your questions. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, it is the Remembering Podcast.
Yes.
And my Instagram is Taylor Nick. If you just want to say hi and hang out personally, I'm totally down for that. And
Yep.
you guys have your own personal Instagrams as well.
Yep. Mine is I am OnenO. OnenO is spelled ONENO. So I am OnenO.
It's how it's spelled on the wall behind him.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're looking
I
at
You're
tried to
watching.
point to it and I realized like my finger would not go into your box.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Amazing.
Wow, technology.
And KK.
I am KK Lagan, and that's spelled Lagan. 2 A's, no E's, no I's, 2 A's.
That's it. Well, thank you guys out there for coming along this wild and fun adventure that we've had today. Thanks
It's
for
like we traveled to Bethlehem. We're the three magi. It was
I feel like I've been on a camel for like 2 hours.
I do have frankincense essential oils upstairs if you guys want.
I have a rolly thing.
Well,
right,
you better
I'm ending, guys.
treasure.
I feel
Those
like
things are expensive.
We've been tangenting for too long, so
Okay.
I'm putting an end to the episode.
We're just hanging.
Thank you, everybody out there, for listening to us. And we'll see you again in January. We're not having another podcast for a little while, so we'll see you in January. But have a beautiful day.
Merry
We'll talk to you later.
Christmas.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas. Happy New Year.